So just to kind of specify from the very beginning, in this talk we're not going to be presenting a paper or an argument as such, rather we're going to be presenting a project called the Project of the Philosophy in the Mountains. The project began in Heythrop in 2013 and the project involves more than 30 people. We've got 3 other members here today who have participated in our weeks. Will and I will be speaking in the name of the group. We are neither the leaders nor the brains of the group. The presentation will be roughly for 10 to 15 minutes in order to leave as much time as possible for questions, though I am conscious that we are slightly overrun at the moment. Since we are very much developing, we invite you to participate in open discussion with questions and suggestions. We will benefit very much from this, so if you could give us as much feedback as possible, that would be fantastic. In the talk 2 of our other members gave a few weeks ago, Marcello expressed that he had a very concrete image of the origins and philosophy in the mountains. Thankfully, I am able to express a similar sentiment, but in rather a different way. For me, the idea was born of reading Plato's dialogues. I had rather wishfully fantasized of the idea of being able to live philosophically, just as the Greeks had done. Admittedly, this seemed rather more achievable in a society built on the labor of slavery. However, I truly believe that the idea is one common to all thinkers, theologians and philosophers. The thought of a place and a time where ideas that we are also enamored and inspired by could grow naturally outside of competition, outside of conflicting ego, but with the time and patience they deserve. This place was to become Philosophy in the Mountains. The idea is simple. It's Philosophy in the Mountains, yeah. The idea is simple. Since 2014, a group of us, roughly 15 to 20 people, have been meeting for a week in summer, possibly close to some mountains, to do philosophy together. Doing philosophy together means 3 things, primarily. So we're thinking reading groups, discussions, and presentations. Will tell you more about what we have done concretely over those years and what our plans are for the future. I want to spend just a few words on the values and ideas behind the group. So I'm going to be talking about 3 things. However, before I go on to that, I'd like to say a little bit about its origins a little bit more. So, it is an important thought for the group was to do philosophy in a setting different from the academic world. Many of us had some frustrations with some aspects of academic philosophy. Its highly specialized status and sometimes distance from the contemporary world. Its emphasis on producing great quantities of written material. Its emphasis which is detrimental both to teaching and to the quality of its contents. It's very much individualistic organization where little space is left for community. In this aspect, Heythrop, as you all know, was an exception, since many professors focus more on teaching rather than publishing. Further, the spirit of the college, its Christian background, as well as its limited size and architecture, gave many of us the feeling of being a part of a community rather than just a number. The experience of philosophy at Heythrop, together with close friendships we built here, became the background of Philosophy in the Mountains. Reflecting on the 4 years, I want to underline 3 aspects of the way philosophy is done during the days of Philosophy in the Mountains. I will call them, to give them a slightly philosophical outlook, concreteness, community, and immanence. So that's concreteness, community, and immanence. Apologies for my atrocious handwriting. So, concreteness. It has always been an important value for us. A philosophy is concrete typically due to its object. However, there are other ways in which philosophy can be concrete. When it addresses particular problems relevant to one's life, for example, the pursuit of happiness or the idea of justice, though this is not all there is to it. Philosophy may be equally concrete due to its method. If it takes into account personal and subjective considerations, a philosophical discussion may approach very concrete ethical issues, yet remain abstract by doing so from a detached personal perspective, i.e. what should one do if confronted with Kant's axe murderer, as opposed to what should we do in such a situation. To bring philosophy closer to life is more than focusing on particular issues. For this reason, we believe that changing the framework of philosophy is done can be of great benefit. We try to enact this change during our weeks together by embedding philosophy in other daily activities, such as cooking, going for walks, and personal exchanges. The time we have there is quite open, which means we are able to do all sorts of different activities, things that interest us, not necessarily confined to philosophical discussion, but also bringing presentations from other people's areas of interest, and also as well from other disciplines, such as, for example, we've had product design, we've had theologians, and I think one time we had psychology as well. So, this gives our discussions an altogether different quality. They tend to be more informed and imbued with our personal experiences, which allows us to avoid getting stuck in vacuous speculation and makes a relevant and interesting discussion. Community is the second and deeply related aspect. Philosophy must be understood as a way of individuals interact with one another. Philosophical discussion should not be insensitive to the human relationships underlying the people participating in it. In layman's terms, our group is first of all a group of friends. Together, we joke, we laugh, we eat, and at times we cry. Due to the quality and quantity of the time spent together, these factors, which are often seen as distractions from fruitful discussion, rather serve as an aid and an easing of joint philosophical adventure. Deep friendship remains within our group, even though every year new people have participated. On all occasions, newcomers have remarked at the ease with which they have settled and been welcomed into the group. And we have had new people every single year, and every single year we've had the same response, and they have felt welcomed and they have felt at ease. Community also refers to the balance between collective and personal dimension of philosophy. Since during the week together, discussions arrive spontaneously from particular situations, philosophical thinking here is not ascribable to individuals, but is rather the activity as a group as a whole. So anything that we produce together, and if we were to, for example, our short manifesto doesn't have one particular name on or one particular author, but rather is seen as something from the group as a whole. Furthermore, at the same time, the group is not moved by an impersonal intentionality, but rather but by a friendship where particular views are always considered. Our discussions rarely develop into arguments where individual positions are shaped in opposition to one another. They rather articulate an understanding in a particular question with our different views and thoughts converge. Finally, I should talk about immanence. Our understanding of immanence is very much informed by Aristotle, and is the idea that philosophical activity is not to be seen as a means to an end, but rather as an end in itself. To illustrate, during the first 2 years, many of us were very much concerned with producing some sort of written material, papers, articles, written works of some sort. After having produced a short manifesto, we came to the realization that, at least for the moment, there is no product of Philosophy in the Mountains more valuable than the week itself. This week gives us all a unique experience of philosophy precisely because it does not set itself particular goals, but leaves plenty of space for spontaneous discussion, which is necessary for the kind of experience Philosophy in the Mountains is. It is hard, if not artificial, to try and transform that experience into some written piece. This does not mean, however, that our group does not want to develop. We have grown in many ways, and we want to develop further by making such experiences available to more people in different ways. So, for example, this year we had a weekend in Germany organised by one of our members, which is a weekend in the mountains, which was a shorter experience, which was trying to make the group more accessible to more people. And that's our real goal, is to bring more and more people into this idea of doing philosophy, living philosophy, and doing it in a way that is something that I think is important to what we all want to do when we're doing philosophy. So, we are hoping to continue with similar projects in the future, but for these things I'm going to hand over to Will, who's going to tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'm just going to briefly say a short history of how the group started, what I did in this first couple of years, how it progressed, and a bit about kind of practically how the week works. We're now in our 5th year, and we've been to Italy, Germany, England, and France this coming year. The group started in the summer of 2014 with students from Heythrop and professors and friends meeting in the Ligurian Alps to discuss philosophy and live closely in relationship with one another. They enjoyed a week full of activities and discussions with talks and presentations, including Vatimo, humanitarian aid, people's own academic endeavours and other activities such as poetry, massage and prayer, and hiking, structured within a communal living sort of space. From this week, everyone in the group sort of endeavoured to make this happen again. And so roughly the structure of the week goes like this. Early risers will engage in a physical activity, yoga, a bit of exercise, or just drinking coffee. And then communally cooking and eating breakfast, followed by then a workshop or a presentation by a group member, and then cooking and eating lunch. After lunch, we might have a bit of downtime, another group presentation, or maybe do some reading, and then engage in other activities like walking. And then in the evening, of course, cooking and eating dinner, and spend the evenings relaxing, dancing, stargazing, drawing, just enjoying the company of each other. The following summer, in 2015, the experiment was repeated, but this time in the Bavarian countryside, and new people joined the group. That was the first year I joined. And from this week, we created a short manifesto of what our aims were for getting together in the group. Following years, we kind of scrapped that idea. Because, as Tristan said, we didn't want to, the aim of it isn't to produce something, it's to enjoy the week. In the summer of 2016, we spent a wet and windy week in Yorkshire Dales and decided to work within the context of a theme, reading 5 papers or so. And due to the weather, we got a lot of reading done. Spending our time together considering different aspects of philosophical practice and its relevance to life. One of the papers was Cottingham's chapter on philosophy and how to live, and it influenced a lot of our group and got to the heart of what we were trying to do there. Trying to answer the question of how philosophy can teach us how to live. Last summer, we went to Italy, and due to issues raised by all of us as majority EU citizens, our discussions and readings were loosely based on politics and enabled us a space to explore our own responses to the EU referendum. We began with Plato, focusing on the relationship between philosophy and justice, to Agamben and the relationship between friendship and politics, Arendt on revolution, Lear focusing on a historical case of cultural crisis, and Rorty with what we found scaring with his scaringly contemporary remarks. Lastly, we looked at Groys, who encouraged us to reflect on the nature of our own project, where we mentioned maybe coming to a conference and sharing our experiences. We also did various workshops on communication and drama and teaching, a bit of music. And then earlier this year, a smaller group met in Germany, and Tristan talked a bit about that, which is kind of the next step for us to allow people who might not have the time or the resources to come on a whole week in the summer to maybe do a smaller weekend visit and spread our group a bit further. So this year we are coming together in France, and we have a loose theme of authenticity, focusing on French thinkers. So, from the very beginning of the Philosophy in the Mountains group, we sought to realise a vision that philosophy is a form of life and a dedication to ideas that is playful and inquisitive. And we hope to find new ways of interpreting ourselves and the world around us and the community in which we find ourselves a part of. Philosophy in the Mountains has and continues to influence many of our lives, whether it be choosing the title or focus of our academic theses or important life decisions. And it's the space that Philosophy in the Mountains facilitates that enables this simplicity of thought and clarity of mind. And we'd like to share the fruits of this with others and encourage anyone who's interested to ask us some questions and explore philosophy as this way of life. Cheers.